Hey, leaders, welcome back to another episode of the Living Leaders Podcast, where, as you know, we talk with real leaders, hearing their stories from the field on what it really takes to transform and heal work culture from the inside out. What does it take to raise the consciousness of our corporate cultures today? How might we scale the positive impact that we're seeking to have in the world by really putting purpose at the center of how we design and run our organizations? These are questions that our guest today, Lara Bezerra, has been asking for quite some time. Lara is a true pioneer when it comes to purpose-driven leadership. She's the founder of Work Coherence, and she has a career that spans over 27 years across 3 continents and 7 countries, where she has held leadership roles in multinational pharmaceutical companies like Bayer. She has also held the position of Chief Purpose Officer. Wherever Lara goes, she is championing the integration of purpose into the very core of the corporate cultures that she's leading. Lara really understands that to be an effective transformational leader, we need to understand not only our environment, but also ourselves and the other humans in it. In today's episode, Lara and I talk quite a bit about rehumanizing leadership and creating safe spaces for leaders to be their authentic selves. We talk about what it really takes to be a purpose-driven leader in today's day and age. It often starts with self-awareness and knowing what your purpose is to such a degree that with total clarity, you can communicate it and embody it when you're with other people. We talk about the role that leaders have to create safe spaces and do a lot of deep listening. Being a leader isn't just about sharing your vision, but it's about receiving the vision and the purpose of others. And that includes not only their work self or their work persona, but also what's important to them outside of work so that they can be a holistic, whole human being, even in the workplace. When we create cultures that support increased clarity and coherence from the individual all the way up to the organizational and industry level, we can then unlock or activate an even higher degree of potential in our organizations and among our teams. And as you'll hear Lara say in the episode, she truly believes in this exponential potential when a team is coherently working together towards shared purpose. They have the trust and the psychological safety to form relational pathways where information can flow, where teams can step into flow state together. And what you get on the other side of this is an organization that works more a living system than a machine. You get an organization that is more self-aware and more conscious. And later in the episode, she talks about what becomes possible when we unlock this potential in how we run our organizations. We start to experience more synchronicity, more serendipity, more alignment, more resonance. Things happen faster. And all the while, the cultures that make those types of outcomes possible also help to heal a lot of the burnout culture that we have unfortunately been brought up in and enculturated into in the last couple of decades. Not only is Lara's work helping to create cultures that heal these patterns of burnout, but she is also helping to create a level of coherence and clarity among purpose-driven companies so that they can not only activate, but accelerate the positive impact and influence that they're having in the world. I feel so grateful that I got to spend this time with Lara and have this conversation. I can't wait for you to hear it. Whether you're leading a team, a project, a community, a family, or yourself, Lara's insights from today's episode are bound to inspire and enlighten you. Join us as we dive into an incredible conversation about living and leading with purpose. Let's get right into it. Lara, I can't even tell you how grateful I am to have you on the show today. I know this conversation is going to be alive for so many reasons, and I can't wait to see where we travel.
I am so happy to be here. I was looking forward to it because our pre-conversation was so heartening. So I am very happy to be here, Nicole.
Thank you. Yes, I too have been looking forward to this on such a soul level because the last time that we met, and we met through a mutual friend, a mutual contact, Gerardo Sagat, who was actually on the show. And so for listeners who haven't caught that episode with Gerardo, it's an amazing one. I feel so grateful to have been connected to Lara through him. And Lara, just to anchor listeners in the story and in the ways that our hearts are connected, you and we both seem to be female leaders who have found ourselves in the corporate space at various times in our career. We have each watched the corporate culture and executive culture evolve over time. And I'm finding that lately, in many of the conversations that I'm having with visionaries and leaders like yourself who are embodying a more conscious version of leadership, I'm finding that it's as if the consciousness of business seems to be evolving. And so I'd love to open up the conversation today just to ask, in your experience, how have you witnessed the consciousness of business and of leadership change over time?
Wow, this is such a beautiful and complex question. So I think that I the last 10 years, I saw so many transformations in business, but I think that I can share my experience that I was in Bayer until 2013, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. And then I moved to Roche, the Genentech pharmaceutical. So having been 17 years in Bayer, a German company. But what is very nice is that it's a German company, but I was a woman that with 29 years old, they took me as an expat and I was like general manager in Hungary. And then I was president of Bayer in Venezuela. And they trusted me a lot. And I think that what I see is that in my previous life, like in Bayer life, lots of coaches that came to me, it was a lot about managing numbers, doing perfect strategies and smart goals that people can follow and then you can control. And then suddenly I started to have some coaches appearing that the companies started to tell, okay, something different is happening in the world. How can we provide tools to the leaders so they can be within this transformation, is still working in the company and the results, but looking for the future. It's not all the companies who were able to do it. And what I have to tell, when I entered to Roche, I was amazed to have my first meetings. Roche is a Swiss company. And there were some trainings that I had that it was even neuroscience brought to us to understand our emotions and how to deal with our emotions and complexity of the world. So this was from 2013. So it's really 10 years from now. I saw all of these trainings coming in the leadership. So the CEO's training, there were people talking about neuroscience, about purpose, how you can elevate the way that you deal with stakeholders. So I was very lucky to be part of companies like Roche, where this consciousness is very strong. And when I was leaving the Roche, they were a lot talking about increasing access of patients, but looking in a way of making a stakeholder strategy. So you see that there are many companies that, depending on their leadership, they are going to this direction. Still, we have companies that are very much command control. But within these companies that are thinking forward, I think that there is a kind of middle management, like a kind of between the higher level board and the executives who are in the operation. If here you have people that are command control, it's very difficult for you to cascade down. So you see in silos how it is going down according to the operation, people who are CEOs on countries, and the big leadership, the board. How is this interaction and how free and how safe is this space for people to implement new thoughts? No? So, but I see this and I see lots of conversations, people talking about the future of economy. I follow a group that is led by Artie Vogt and Antoniette Wiebel. She's a professor in a Swiss college, and they are talking about uh, leadership for good, and they are talking about a new way of bringing the economy globally. So there are so many things going on that is beautiful, but it's a transformation, right?
Yes, yes. And I suppose like any good transformation, it takes time and it seeps into the cracks of the organization or the cracks of our culture from many different angles. And I find it so wonderful to hear that you found yourself in an organization where trust did exist. There was a lot of trust in you as a rising leader in the organization. It sounds like there were leading conversations using this language and exploring these topics that were at the time quite on the forefront. I mean, now they're becoming quite popular. We're seeing a lot of leadership training pop up all around the world in organizations that focus on purpose-driven leadership or circular economies. Luckily, this language is on a broader scale infiltrating our day-to-day. And I find that when the language gets an update and when we're able to really share from our hearts in these safe spaces with other leaders, the transformation engine can start to really turn. Another thing that I love about what you said is how the leaders, and this is, I'll just speak from my experience in observing leadership in the last 5 years. I'm finding that the leaders who are self-aware and have some sort of practice for cultivating their empathy, cultivating their sensitivity to not just market trends or trends within their customer, but to these larger shifts in our collective or in our culture, they have a better chance of being adaptable and pulling those trends into their company and into the way that they lead. I find this so interesting because those living leaders, right? The very name of this podcast, those living leaders build sentient, conscious, living organizations that can then adapt over time. And so I'm curious what's possible in culture and in leadership when more consciousness, more purpose-driven mindset is brought into a culture.
I think, Nicole, that this is such important perspective for us to see, because it's a kind of really awareness. Because I think in the past, everybody thought, okay, people there in the organization, each one each person can have his or her task. We have the strategy and each one will do, and then the sum of the parts will be perfect. It was what everybody understood. You don't have to understand the other or whatever. Suddenly we understand that there is a collective wisdom that is needed to be awakened, and you can only awaken it if each individual understands system thinking and the leader understands system thinking. Understanding that the organization is not only one thing separated from whatever is the place that they are serving. And what I see right now that is very beautiful is that the leaders are starting to understand that, okay, for example, I give a very simple example. Okay, I have to give feedback because the person didn't deliver the tasks and the performance is low. So I have to give feedback. I have to sit down. How I tell the person that he or she is doing bad and that they have to improve. It's not about it anymore. Now leaders are trying to understand if a person is not delivering some result, what is his or her environment, what is happening that this is not happening. Somehow people start to understand that is like that saying that if a flower doesn't bloom, you don't change the flower, but you make a better soil and environment. Maybe this person at that moment has a problem at home, and it's much more complex. So as much as we take each individual into consideration. And you don't need to be like being a psychologist of a person, but give an environment where the person can talk and can feel in a way that can share what is going on. Others understand. And as a collective, as a whole, if somebody is in a bad space, the others can cover with them. As our body, if there is any part of our body that is not working properly, the rest of the body will try to adapt so the whole body could stay alive. And it's the same for an organization. And when leaders start right now to see that it's not one individual or a sum of individuals, when these dynamics together is good and there is a positive background for this collective can be like uplifted in a way that can unleash an exponential potential that you can do anything. And leaders who see it, who see this possibility to give a good space, a good environment, so everybody nourished each other. And then from this is like elevating the consciousness. By elevating the consciousness of everybody, it's like the cognitive maturity grows. Because what we are doing, we are responsible for each other, how we deliver our results because of the purpose that we have for society and the benefit that we bring. If we don't bring this, somebody will be impacted negatively. So it's not anymore, I'm working for the task and paycheck, and if I don't do, it's okay because maybe I don't receive my bonus, but I will just try to guarantee my salary. This you will be mediocre, and you are not worried about the results. But in this other way that you change the consciousness that you are here for each other, as a collective, we have something to deliver to society. And if the leader here is able to bring this to this organization, everybody works as a responsibility, not bad responsibility, but a kind of responsibility that I feel that this is my value that I'm bringing to society and I have to care for it. So changes completely, increasing the consciousness of the organization by bringing human centricity, purpose. You elevate the cognitive maturity of the organization. So your results will be better. There is no way. And even if you're in a crisis and something will go wrong, it will go least worse than it would be if they are not conscious, because they will try to hide. So do you understand how beautiful it is?
Yes. Oh, it really is. It makes me think that it's much more of an interconnected system than I think we learned in, say, business school or in an MBA program 10 plus years ago. There wasn't that interconnectivity. Things did feel a lot more siloed, even in terms of the business function and how we were learning to run companies. And so I love the example you gave of both the flower and the other metaphors that you've been using to showcase this interconnectedness. It sounds like in a system like this, what you said about creating space and creating an environment or a context or a culture even, right? I often think of culture as our context, culture as our social context or our social environment. Yeah. And we influence it, but it also influences us and how we grow. And so to cultivate a context or a culture where people feel safe to give feedback, where they feel safe to be honest and truthful and authentic and share, hey, I need to put my hand up and ask for help on this because I have this other thing happening in my life, right? Because you touched on this theme of the holistic nature of our lives and of our human beingness, which I think has been neglected for far too long in the separation of work and everything that exists outside of work. But if we see this as an interconnected, holistic system made up of interconnected, holistic beings, then we can really start to understand the ways that we impact and influence each other. And it seems so important that that environment that we create as leaders would allow people to be comfortable enough to be their authentic self. And so I want to get maybe a little granular here in any examples that you've seen or used as a leader where you have been able to increase the psychological safety or invite the authentic truth of what was really going on and help people feel safe. What have you seen work when creating an environment like this?
So as I worked in different countries, and I was like being moved from one country to another, each time that I arrived in a country, it was very difficult for me because it's a different culture. And I am Brazilian, but I lived the last 25 years in different countries. So arriving in a country, the first thing that I used to do, and I did this very consciously, intentionally in Venezuela and India, I used to come, and the first thing I started to talk to everybody, and I started to ask small questions, but the whole organization, in groups or not. So if you would be in my place, what would be 3 things that you would keep because you think that you're doing very well? What would be 3 things that you would change? So from this, you start to listen to people, and you start a conversation where what you are telling me is important. And after 60 days talking to everybody, I would make a little plan to tell people, these are the things I am focusing on, and these are the things that I am supporting the organization to go further, and I will not touch because you guys are doing very well. After this, I used to have a conversation with my leadership team to ask them, what is the ideal leader for you? So you tell what is the ideal leader for you all. And they used to kind of make a list of the things that were important for them, and normally would be things that previously they didn't see or that they're willing to have. So I can adapt to see it. At the same time, I was sharing what for me would be an ideal teamwork. And then in these very concrete conversations in the beginning, I would then go very deep to do exercise of purpose with the whole organization. I used to bring, for example, my learnings. So when I talk about meditation, why is important meditation for me? And I used to invite people to do meditation or to do yoga. This is like a very subtle part that was there. At the same time, what I did in India and in Venezuela was that I was giving space for people to make decisions. For example, what we did is to have a virtual unit of people who would volunteer, and they would be responsible to elevate themselves, ourselves, as human beings. So we had what was called Russian Positive in Venezuela. That was a group of people that volunteer, and there were 4 pillars. They were like, one pillar was gratitude, that other pillar was celebration, another pillar, I think it was well-being, volunteering. And these groups would have leaders, and they would bring to the organization activities, and they would make a calendar among themselves, a calendar of the whole year, bringing these parts. And these were like very intentionally chosen topics, like gratitude is something that we have to have. Because in a company, when you delegate the happiness, the motivation of you to HR or to the boss, and the questions of the HR is what the company can do for you to feel better and feel at your best. You are taking the power from the people. So we made differently. So what you guys can do and which environment can you build so we are the best for making decisions and bringing the best to the organization. And then I used to have also a vision. So what is the purpose of the company? So what's the vision for the next 5 years? So what do we want to be? And we create the vision, and then we go towards this vision. And then the strategy that was created each year was based on all of these soft points that we have already worked and thought, a vision that we want to go to, what kind of human being we want to be, and which kind of citizens we want to be in the country. So we also told we want to be better citizens to the country that we are, and we want to use the company as a tool for us to be better human beings with our purpose and better citizens through delivery, what the company, the value the company can deliver to society. So I did this in Hungary, and in India I went even deeper, because there, for example, we changed the way that we were measuring people's performance, not anymore by medicine that were sold, but they were measured by life that we're saving. And you told something before, Nicole, that I loved. For me, it's super important. When you change language, you change everything. So, for example, we changed language there. So instead of business plan, we were calling life-saving plans. Instead of commercial teams, we call value teams. So marketing was value creation and sales was value specialists. So when you change the names and you tell, this is what I want you to do, marketing, you should create value. And sales, you should be a value specialist. What is your specialist of value? What is the value that the stakeholders need, that the marketing, that the value creation team can create to help you to bring this value to the society? So when you start to change the language, and changing the language is something that already changes a lot in the organization and offer a very good safe space for people to talk also differently and bring the best out of them. Yeah. And there are so many things that we did, Nicole, and all of this transformation, we had like Fridays that we talked about fears that we had, doubts that we had. We talked openly in groups about it. So it's like we did so many things because I truly believe that the culture is the way people talk in the coffee machine when you were not there. And when you arrive there, they don't change the subject. If you are a CEO and you arrive in the coffee machine to take coffee and people stop talking and change the subject, the culture that you believe your company has is very different from
Yes.
what you wanted. Yeah.
Wow. I love that, almost as a metric or a characteristic of transparency and people's degree of how safe they feel to be authentic. There's so much gold in what you've shared here. Just pulling on this thread a little bit more of when we change the language, we start to change everything, including the conversations that we're having with each other, including the authentic feedback that we feel comfortable and safe enough to give each other. This impacts where a company goes. It impacts how it handles adversity and conflict and how proactive or responsive it can be to real threat. And I love that you actually had a space on Fridays where you invited people's fears and what they were noticing, maybe where they were proactively seeing a blockage that you as a team could then remove. And I can't help but remember one of my favorite bosses of all time that I ever had, when she would notice, her name was Tracy, and when she would notice that I was stressed, she would say, all right, let's just get it all on the table. What are we worried about? What do we fear? What's the worst that we think could happen in this? And let's just create a risk management plan to look at how real are these fears, and then create action on the fears or the worries and anxieties that are real. And I can't tell you how much just being in the presence of that question and invitation impacted me as a person. It primed me to have a different inner culture in the way that I speak to myself. And so now when I am getting into an anxious or fear-based mindset in any setting, with any company I run or any team that I'm organizing, I can have that conversation with myself as well and create that psychologically safe space in my own mind to say, okay, let me get all the fears on the table. Let me ask those questions that Tracy used to ask me. And so I think one of the really critical things that you're pointing to is when we, through our leadership, when we model this language, when we model the curiosity and the safety that good questions can invite, we also invite those around us to level up their own inner culture in a way. And you did something that I don't think I've heard anyone explicitly name before, in the way that you described how you not only changed the language of the roles and the goals, but also the collective understanding of how the mission would impact the broader context. There's so much that you're pointing towards that I really see as a different or evolved set of rules that we can learn to play by in business and in corporate. Everything I'm hearing you say is around leadership can start with modeling. It can start with
Yes.
being curious and inviting people into their own leadership and into their own cultural healing or transformation journey. I think that word transformation really describes what I'm feeling and what you're saying of
Mhm.
you're paving the path for individual and collective transformation to happen. And therefore, you're paving the way for industry level transformation or societal transformation to happen.
Yes. Yes. Nicole, imagine the treasure that leaders have today in their hands. After the pandemic, so many humans went so much inside, worked inside, and studied ways for you to do better your life, to deal with problems and emotions. It's so strong, this. And what is so beautiful is that at that time, when we started to work in this way with this kind of transformation, when I was bringing the intention behind it, that we want everybody to feel the value that we are bringing, bring our purpose. We want the stakeholders to understand how much they mean to us and how they have to be connected to our strategy. And we want them to develop the strategy with us. We are not afraid. Competitors. There is no competition because India has to increase the healthcare access. And if everybody helps a little, we increase the pie instead of fighting for it. And when we started to bring this, and we started to bring some theories and to bring some expertise that all of us had, suddenly it starts to emerge in the organization, ideas and wisdom. It's not intellect, it's wisdom that people were bringing to add on the strategy. And suddenly it was so huge the way that we evolved. In 3-4 months, we evolved more than we would evolve in 4 years. I learned something from my directors in India that it's so precious to me, that changed my inner self because of what they brought to me. So we were talking how can we relate to each other in a way that we don't judge, we don't criticize. We are really like opening up to something bigger that is coming, to an emerging future that we can build together. And then they brought one concept from psychology, and they told, we have to have unconditional positive regards towards each other when we are talking and when we are interacting. When we are giving feedback to a co-worker because the results are not good or they had a bad attitude, if we have unconditional positive regard, we trust this person unconditionally, knowing that this person wants to do, these people want to do their best. And because they want to do their best, maybe there is something in their assumptions that brought them to have decisions that didn't bring the result that we expected. But by talking to the person and understanding where they come from, they can even find better ways for them to solve whatever is there. And we don't even need to go there. We create the space, helping the person reflect. And the unconditional positive regard is what psychologists, therapists have. They have to have. It is, I think, a term of the 60s that the psychologists told that they have to have for their patients. So the patients, so they inside themselves, they are open to believe that any human being can improve whatever they did, and you go out of your judgment because you understand that this person has a good intention, even if the way that they make decision is wrong. So this term I learned from my team. Can you believe that leaders today, if they bring this kind of culture, is culture because the leader brings the culture, how they talk, how they believe in their teams. Do you understand how leaders can learn from their teams and how an exponential potential can be unleashed in each organization, and how your humanity can increase consciousness if each leader understands that they are the engineers of the neuroplasticity, of the brains, of the inner self of each one, and they can elevate together, and then they can at the same time create an environment where I, as a leader, I can have much better environment to be at my best. And you understand, this is a kind of cycle. This is systemic. This is a positive systemic impact. It's beautiful. All leaders have a treasure in their hands to bring a culture where they can be better human beings and create better human beings. Isn't it amazing?
It really is. The way that you've painted this potentiality is not only inspiring, but I think serves as a bit of a North Star that many of us and many organizations can set the GPS coordinates towards if we're not currently using that type of culture. So much can change through how we change and how we show up differently. And we might not always have control over the culture of an organization when we first enter it, but we do have control over, or autonomy and sovereignty over, how we treat ourselves and how we then show up in conversation in the face of adversity or conflict. I feel so empowered by what you're saying because of this autonomy and this sovereignty to actually do something, to be the change, right? Which is such an age-old phrase, but I think there's so much truth in this, so much truth.
Yes. Yeah, because Nicole, imagine that this is life, like history. People who have visions and facing any adversity, they have this vision of something that they believe. And people can call purpose and call anything, but it's like, I feel that I have this vision and I have to realize this vision in my life. These are the people who brought humanity to another level. I believe that we have to talk about our fears. We have to be open to this space where you can talk about it. At the same time, it's super important that you have very clear vision, dreams, because building things based on fears will make you avoid what you were afraid of and the problematic part. But if at the same time you have your mitigation plan, but you just build your mitigation plan after you build your dream plan. So you want to save lives, you want to feed the world, you want to bring comfort to the world. What is that you want to do? What is the meaning of your company? Or let's say company. And if you know this and you are focused on this, maybe when you're going to make the mitigation plan here because of the fears that you had, half of the fears don't exist anymore, because when you build your plan to achieve what you believe, this is not more important. This is not important anymore. And so many times we did this exercise, and when we saw that half of the fears, it's not fear. This is not even a threat. No, this is not a threat. And I believe this phrase of Einstein, that he tells that the most important decision a human being can have is whether we believe that we live in a hostile or friendly universe. If we think that we live in a friendly universe, your dreams will go into the direction that you need. And you are building this environment where infinite possibilities are there and exponential potential can come. But if you work with limiting beliefs and fears, the abundance is not there. And then we fight. Then we fight for the scarce resources that we see there because we see only threats. But when we go out of this fear and have the fear, but the fear is not leading your decisions, the fear is guiding you not to make mistakes that you will regret. Fear of not being accepted because you were not responsible enough, because you did something wrong with the company. This is a fear that you have to have. But a fear that you will not grow in the future because a competitor is coming, this is not a fear, this is limiting. So which are the fears that you are allowing to be in your organization as responsibility or as fear of failure? And if you have the right fears in the place and then you have the right set of beliefs, what is that you believe? It's like a human being. I always try to describe myself of what I believe and what my purpose is. When I introduce myself in speeches or keynotes that I do, I tell I am Lara. I believe the infinite potential of human beings when driven by purpose. And my purpose is to elevate humanity's consciousness. So if companies can tell this, each one there understand how to align their own purpose with this purpose. and then they can go further. Because I think that the positivity, and it's not for you to be happy the whole time, but it's for you
Right.
to live in abundance and not in a limiting universe, not in scarcity. This is so important.
Yeah. So important. It's almost as if these are the operating system or the iOS that sits underneath the culture or sits within the mindset of the individuals on the team. And this might be unique for each person depending on trauma in childhood or attachment style. The brain, I'm learning, responds or it can respond quite differently to stress or to threat depending on our upbringing in a lot of ways. But I really hear you, and I really agree that getting this mindset within and collectively is so important. And the way that you articulated your purpose, what strikes me about this is it's so clear, so clear. This is my purpose. This is what I believe. And so I'm imagining a world where the individual players in an organization or on a team have the opportunity to not only be on their own healing journey of becoming the version of themselves that they want to become, but that clarity across the individuals of what drives each person, what value set does each person prioritize and how they lead their lives and how they show up. Knowing all of this and having it be out in the open creates such a level of clarity and getting to know the true essence of one another. And in the teams that I've been a part of where those standards are really high, I'm amazed. I mean, you talk about the exponential potentiality of humanity. There's one team in particular that I'm a part of now, the teaching team at Harvard University in our sustainability program that we teach to executives. We've been doing it for about 10 years now. And so we know each other very, very well, professionally and personally. There's so much trust. My goodness, there's so much trust that there's almost telepathy. And we've built in enough redundancy of skill set that we can operate as this collective organism in a way. And so I've gotten a taste of what can be possible when we have the clarity within ourselves, the clarity across each other. And I know that in your work, you talk a lot about coherence as well. And so I want to invite this very potent, very sort of magical and scientific word into the conversation, because I imagine that with clarity, we can start to build coherence across these many layers of an organization. And so I would love to invite listeners to understand more about your work in this coherence space.
Yeah, I think that it's something that it comes naturally. I think that the word coherence came to me with my years of experience leading teams that became like so coherent that they resonate. And because they were resonating, this exponential potential was unleashed, and then stakeholder families, it was spread around. And I understand coherence in a way that first starts the coherence with oneself. And I understand one being coherent when you understand why you were here in this life. And it can be a purpose, but it can be also, I am here because I have to bring my family to another level, because my family deserves it, and my family being happy, I am happy. So purpose will change with your life. The important is that you understand what is the meaning, what I am here for. So what is that I believe, what kind of person I am. So when you have a very clear purpose and you understand who you are, I think that coherence comes of you being able to be oneself wherever you are. So when somebody will see me talking to you, Nicole, is the same discourse, is the same speech, is the same fundaments that I'm talking to you. I'm talking to my children, I'm talking to their friends, I'm talking to my colleagues of work, I'm talking in my community, the place. So when you have this coherence that is framed by knowing who you are and what is your purpose in life, I tell that we enter in coherence flow. If you are in coherence with yourself, and then you find another person that is in coherence, people who are in coherence with themselves, somehow there is automatically a genuine relationship because you were clear what they want, you were clear what you want, and this never conflicts because the purpose, when a purpose is genuine, is about ourselves being happy because we are making something for society. Is what I love the purposehood definition of purpose. That is a selfish altruist definition. It's like something that you do for yourself because you're doing for others, but because you're doing for others, you're doing for yourself, and this is this kind of cycle. As much as you do for others, you increase yourself and you're nurturing yourself from the others' benefit of what you're doing in your life. So when two people who are living like this connect to each other, it brings a kind of resonance that creates a coherent flow. If two people in an organization are talking this language and talking what they believe and doing like this, it's contagious. Then the other people will start to, and it's inspiring. People start to live because it's better to live like this. It's better to live not having to think, what should I say? What should I do to please this kind of people or that kind of people or this environment or that environment? If you feel yourself comfortable wherever you are and the groups are feeling comfortable with each other, then there is this really, I believe that the exponential potential unleashes when there is this coherence flow, this resonance of people with the same purpose. And it's very interesting because in India, we were in a stage of connection as a team, as an organization, that some people asked me how we measure when everybody are really connected at the purpose level and in a very higher consciousness. We stakeholders, how we measure this, Lara? And I told them, when synchronicities, serendipities start to happen, you will go to a hospital, and when you are in the corridor of a hospital and something that you thought about, somebody comes to offer you this. Or when you are talking about something and a phone will ring and it's somebody talking about something similar because they need your help. Because as much as we put out there, and this is logical, it's super logic. If you tell people what is your real intention, what is your ultimate outcome that you want to achieve, and your purpose, many people will start to know your purpose and bring it something that is related to it. So, for example, one example of this is us talking. You were talking to Gerardo, and then you mentioned purpose or something like this, and then Gerardo told you have to talk to Lara. So you understand, these are the serendipities, the synchronicities that they are not, they are science and they are obvious, because if you are living your genuine self and you're living your purpose, absolutely everything conspires for you to do what you want, what you need, right?
Yeah.
So this is
And
coherence.
yes. Oh, such a beautiful explanation of this. And the serendipity, synchronicity piece is so fascinating to me because in spiritual circles, you might hear people talk about this through the lens of law of attraction or positive psychology even, right? Think it and so it is. But to your point, I do think it's logical and scientific in the sense that when you're clear and coherent and sharing your message, just like you said, you're effectively increasing the probability. And it's a mathematical universe that we live in. It's also magical, it seems, and it's fun to choose to see it that way sometimes in how we meet one another, in how things flow together. But the probability increases. And to your point, I think we do start to tap into this activated flow intelligence in a way where the synchronicity connects us to the people who are going to help us get to the shared vision, or who are the right person at the right time for joining our team or leading that project. But we can't be connected with those people, circumstances, or opportunities if we can't find the other resonant players. So in a way, we have to be vibrating and resonating within ourselves to even be seen and even communicate what it is that we're trying to do. And that does take a degree of self-awareness and doing some of the inner work. It takes perhaps some time and spaciousness to be in a more reflective state or to get out in nature. And I think this is one paradox that to some extent worries me a little bit in the leadership space, but I also think it will resolve itself, where you have cultures of hyper productivity, just so busy all the time, wearing busy like a badge of honor. And then to actually heal those cultures, you need those folks to slow down, to get out in nature, to become more self-reflective. They don't get the opportunity inside that culture. So they're almost needing to make those opportunities for themselves. And it's a little bit counterintuitive. And so I suppose one of my concluding questions here is, to anyone who is listening, who wants to become a more conscious leader, who feels stuck in the old paradigm of work where they're so busy, they're burnt out, and they don't see a way out, do you have any tips or suggestions for how folks might bring a little bit more consciousness into their current leadership or into their day for this type of transformation?
So I think that is beautiful because I have 1,000 answers that I'm thinking, but I want to give some that are very concrete. So, for
Yes,
example, I think that
thank you.
if you just think in the business, Peter Drucker told that culture is strategy for breakfast. What he's telling is that the behavior of people, so it's incoherence, is dissonance, because people are being incoherent because you have a strategy, but the way people behave is counterproductive to the strategy. What does it mean? Even within your strategy, if the communication is very important, if you build a strategy that you want to live it well, think why this strategy is there. So if you want to bring consciousness, go to very concrete things like your strategy and ask, why are you doing this strategy? Why this strategy is important? Ask the why, the purpose of everything. And when you see why you are doing this strategy, be sure to communicate from your heart why this strategy is important for everybody. So if you go to the very concrete part that you have to deliver a strategy, it has to work. So bring consciousness to this strategy and make sure that every individual of the company can explain the strategy from this place of why we are doing this, why this is important for the company, and why this will have an impact outside. Who will be impacted? Why we are doing this? Because we want to increase the market share, the results, but to increase market share and results, you have to benefit people. So when you're doing a strategy, so the first thing, when you're doing strategy, why you are doing, who you are benefiting, and bring this. When you did this is one thing that is part of the consciousness. But what you can do that is very beautiful to give this space, that I think that I gave this tip to many, more than 200 people that I mentored, like CEO, the last 2 or 3 years. Open a space like Fridays, let's say, that you do a breakfast, a talk that is open, without agenda. It's just 1 hour. And then you bring, I used to bake a cake or to go to some place and have a little room or a place that I would be with this cake. People grab their coffees, and instead of having coffee, some other place, come to have coffee with me, and there is a cake here. And let's just talk. And you start talking. When you start talking, you start to connect in a deeper level, Nicole. And vulnerability starts to be kind of easier because you know each other. You are talking about other things. You understand you from the human level. There is nothing more impactful for your consciousness, deepening the human relationships. So when human relationship is deepened, consciousness comes because you see people as humans. You see people as humans with desires, fears. And when you start to look like this, you start to bring this consciousness, and then you see completely different. So if you do some breakfasts Friday, that is just 1 hour of your calendar, and this 1 hour will save you many, many, many hours after, because you had this connection and you had this, and you don't need to go there to ask somebody and how I talk to this person. I don't know this person. But if you start to have this kind of breakfasts, and then you have different people coming, and then you go to a different place to have breakfast with people. So this Friday I am driving to, I don't know which affiliate to have breakfast there. Have this culture of conversation without an agenda, 1 hour per week.
Yeah.
This can bring you in a space that then other things will unfold for you to increase consciousness. But very clear communication about the strategy with a very clear why, purpose, why we are benefiting in society, and bring this space of conversation, start a lot with the consciousness. And in this space of conversation, if you start to bring what you are doing to improve, what books you were reading. I used to bring books with me and tell, this is the book that I'm reading, which book you were reading. And then we started to have this kind of exchanges that were like so deep. And I believe this is the way for a leader to start to be human, because to be conscious is to be human first. And we are not a machine. We are not heroes. We are not examples of doing everything right. We are just leaders that are giving space for people to be their best, actually, to be better as human beings. If we understand that leaders are this, we have to be better human beings, and we have to be human beings. So this is a very important step for consciousness. This is my way of thinking, right, Nicole?
Oh, wow. That strikes the deepest of chords, the way you've described that. It rehumanizing leadership to not be machines, to build those relational pathways of trust and authenticity across one another. I can really see how in a crisis or in a moment of big rapid change, the benefit of having those authentic relational pathways could really be the make or break. It's not the system or the document that you built that says what you're
No.
going to do in this crisis. It's the person that you can pick up and you already have that relationship to. And I think trust is really the currency of the future in a lot of
Yes.
ways. And I think leaders who understand this and build the relationship, they're basically building the neural network of the
Yes.
collective visioning for this better
Completely.
world that our hearts know is possible. So
Yes.
I'm so with you, Lara, and the way
And then, Nicole,
that you speak.
And I just want, because what you are telling, so there are science behind it, because there is this organizational cognitive neuroscience. So I was searching for it. So there is a path of study. There is a study that is called organizational cognitive neuroscience, that the last 10 years, they have made tons of research on how the organization, how is the neuroscience behind the decision-making process of the organizations. And there is neuroscience behind it. So that's why I tell
That
so
is
much that
amazing.
these neuronal connections that you are creating, you are really creating neuronal connections within this organization. And whatever you bring there, if you bring fear, these are the negative neuroplasticity that you will create. But if you bring this kind of space and just humanity, the neural pathway that you will create, it's like so beautiful. And remember something so important. The biggest disease of organizations nowadays is burnout. And all economies lose so much on burnout. But this is only because of the environment you live. It's just one. If all leaders would have breakfast with their people and would allow themselves to be humans, I can bet that half of this burnout cost that we have today would be gone. Because it's up to leaders to be humans, to allow others to be humans, and not to kind of pressure cook all their emotions and sentiments and fears. But if everybody's human, it just flows. Right? So organizational cognitive neuroscience. So I really hope that many leaders study it.
Yes, yes. I can't wait to study it more myself. And I think my new mission, because that sounds so fascinating, is to maybe find one of these organizational cognitive scientists to come on the show and share some of this, because I just think it's absolutely fascinating. And when we think of living systems and living organisms and these organizations that act more like nature than a machine, I think understanding this
Mhm.
cognitive collective function is really, really important moving forward, especially if we're going to rapidly respond together to some
Yes.
of the stimulus that's out there. So wow, Lara, I knew this was going to be an amazing conversation, and it absolutely was. I want to leave listeners with any opportunities or invitations that you might have where they can follow your work or get to know you more, get to hear more of your story. Where can they
Mhm.
find you?
Well, in LinkedIn, it's Lara Bezerra, Instagram, and my website is www.larabezerra.com. So it's very easy. It's just my name, and that is here, Lara Bezerra, and you can find me everywhere.
Incredible.
Thank you,
Lara, thank
Nicole.
you so
Thank you
much
so much. It
for
was so nice. I always love
yes,
talking to you.
so nice. Same and same. It's so nourishing to to tap into what I really hope and feel the future of business and leadership is. I really think this is where it's going, and hearing your lived examples of how you've been healing culture, it just is even more evidence to me that we can do this as a humanity. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you.